short, is it time to ban drilling grouse shooting?
Should I just save this question a lot of time and just say, yes it is?
No, it does answer the question. I think, just to go back to what Tina was saying in her question, the full question, she said wildlife crime, ecocide, the climate crisis, public opinion, millions of pounds in government subsidies, and is it finally time to ban driven grouse shooting? I would agree. I think it most definitely is. I don't see justification for this, but clearly some people still do. And I'd be interested what the other panel. Tony, I'm going to ask you. Do you see there's still justification for this?
We get a big cheer in this room when you ask the question in that way. Bear in mind that there are many other people who are not in the room who would boo the question. And I think part of the trouble we've got with a whole host of conservation questions at the moment is that they're becoming very polarised, they're becoming very divisive, they're becoming very angry, and I think as a result of that, what people tend to do is dig deeper trenches. And when they dig deeper trenches, they're not talking to each other, they're lobbing hand grenades over the top without even making eye contact. In fact, what you just said, Hannah, about veganism, it's a good example. It's exactly the same. And it creates a dynamic between people, then they stop talking. So we can all cheer in here. Go to Yorkshire where there might be a public meeting of people whose livelihoods rely on that, and they would be cheering in the opposite direction. So I think what we have to do as we look at these complicated and challenging questions is invest in good quality dialogue, try and find out what good looks like, even in the game management sector. Some people would be appalled at the idea of shooting wildlife. In some cases it can actually be good for conservation. What does that look like? What's the good practice? How do we work with the influential people in those worlds to be developing good practice as the norm rather than the exception? And as was just said, there's a whole range of questions here. There's water quality, there's carbon dioxide emissions, there's biodiversity, there's animal welfare issues, there's chemical issues linked with the avoidance of disease in grouse populations. All that stuff needs to be properly debated, and we need to come to some good solutions, and then we need to find a good way of getting everybody into the best place. That's my approach as chair of Natural England, and I think in the end, quite a lot of what we need to do on these subjects is actually not really about the science and the facts of the matter. It's about the quality of the dialogue and whether we can bring people together to work together. Otherwise they resist, they don't move, and we have a big fight and not much changes. That's my opinion.
If I step back and look at the sort of, the game shooting industry, it's massively expanded, particularly if you look at pheasant shooting, for example. It's clear that many farmers and landowners decided to diversify. Some went to set up trout farms, some went to set up, shooting estates effectively, and to intensively breed, many chicks of which are brought in from outside this country. And we release, I think the League Against Cruel Sports has said that there's probably nearly 60 million game birds a year are shot or released into our countryside. There could be maybe 40 million of those. Now, we don't know what impact that number of animals has. We don't know in terms of how much impact it has with the competing for different food sources with other species, potential disease risks. At least you would presumably accept, Tony, that we need to know.
Yeah,
would you accept the wild justice a right to challenge that aspect of this without knowing?
On that specific point, I can't go into details because this is now subject of a legal discussion. What I can say, however, is that we do need to understand the impact of these choices we make in terms of countryside management, including the release of different creatures, whether they be game birds or anything else. And what we need to be doing is finding ways in which we can mitigate any of the downsides of that. So, and at Natural England, we're working with the British Association for Shooting and Conservation at the moment to try and understand some of these issues in relation to impacts on the ecology resulting from this very considerable introduction of biomass. I don't think I'm being very controversial in saying that the biomass of pheasants and partridges released annually is considerably bigger than all of the wild birds put together. So you would expect that there would be something to look at there, and I'm looking forward to us looking at that, even though I can't go into the details, given that we're in a legal discussion. You can understand.
Yeah, but can I You've seen that image of that golden eagle this week.
I have.
What does that mean to you about our perspective? Does that shock you? Does that...
Of course it shocks me. And actually, intrinsically, I will tell you, I don't understand the killing of any live animal for pleasure. I don't get it. So I start... Just for a second about elephants.
Please.
And I want to tell you a quick story, what happened in Botswana. So Botswana overnight, about 4 or 5 years ago, decided it was going to stop trophy hunting. There was a particular project that I knew and understood in Botswana, and it was bang slap next to a photographic concession where you take photographs. Bang slap next to that was a trophy hunting concession. And the friends that I knew were really, really against the trophy hunting, and well, everybody was like, fantastic, we've got rid of it. What actually happened is that land was then taken up by farmers. And more elephants are being killed now through wildlife conflict than were being shot before in a managed environment. Now, I'm really underpinning what Tony is saying, which is I am dead against it. I do not understand it, but a planned way out of it is the best way, because you stop it overnight or you have this battle. It either doesn't happen because you have a fight, or you stop it overnight, you get unintended consequences. So, and that's, I promise you, that comes from somebody who really, really actually worries for the soul of people who want to shoot live, healthy animals.
I'm 57 years old. When I was 12, 13, 14, I got into birds, and I would read small paragraphs in the OSPB's magazine about the illegal persecution of our raptors. And when I grew a bit older, I realised that NGOs like the RSPB were in dialogue with factions of the shooting fraternity, and they were working very hard to find a common solution to this issue. I can't wait any longer. I keep seeing dead harriers. I've had them in my hands. I keep seeing images of golden eagles. Along with Ruth Tingay, I support a satellite tracking programme to help scientific studies in Scotland, the byproduct of which is that we see these eagles being slaughtered on driven grouse moors. I think that ultimately we have tried a partnership approach and it has failed. And what we've discovered about the shooting fraternity, as opposed to the farming fraternity and the angling fraternity, is that they are wholly intransigent when it comes to taking any small changes. They still shoot with lead. We don't have lead in our petrol, our paint and our pipes because it's toxic. It kills 100,000 wild birds that we know of, water birds in the UK. And what we see with parts of this community, the illegal, the unsustainable shooting, the 60 million pheasants, the burned, drained, predator denuded, criminal fraternity of grouse moor keepers that are still killing our eagles and hen harriers, is that we've run out of time, and the solution is to act now and ban it. And at this point in time, 57,668 people agree with Wild Justice and have signed our petition inside 3 days. I would urge you to do the same.
Okay, thank you.